You wake up in the darkness, the weight of the world pressing down on you, suffocating the very air around you. The humidity clings to your skin like a heavy, unseen hand, as though the night itself refuses to release its grip. The air tastes like smoke, thick and choking, and the distant scent of something burning, something that once lived, fills your lungs. It's not just the land that's burning, it's your future, your very sense of survival. The world outside is not the same. You've seen the distant plumes of smoke rising over the hills, thick and ominous, spreading across the horizon like a dark omen. The war, the Opium War, is no longer something whispered about in the corners of the village. It's here. The British cannons have begun their bombardment of Canton, and you can feel it in your bones. The tremor in the ground, the heavy pressure of the world caving in. They've come to take everything, not just your land, but your life, your spirit. The sounds of war are distant, but they carry with them a palpable fear. It gnaws at your chest, a steady reminder that you are no longer safe. The once quiet life you knew, the simple rhythms of your labor, have been replaced by a constant undercurrent of terror. The village that once thrived now feels like a fragile shell, ready to be shattered at any moment. The world you've known, the one you relied on, is vanishing in real time. Your mind races, filled with questions you can barely understand, let alone answer. The explosions in the distance shake the earth beneath you, but it's not the ground that trembles most. It's your heart, your soul. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time. I'm curious to see where all you night owls are listening in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. How do you survive when survival means losing everything that made you human? How do you keep the remnants of your humanity intact when the very fabric of your existence is torn apart by forces you can't control? You want to run, to escape, but where to? There's no safe place left, no sanctuary. The darkness outside is no longer just the absence of light. It is the silence of a dying world where the only certainty is that things will only get worse. You hear the distant rumble of cannons once more, and something inside you breaks. The village you called home. It is no longer a home. It is a prison. Your body trembles as you lie in the quiet aftermath, the silence deafening in its own way. In this stillness, the terror is far worse than the sound of gunfire. The horror is not in the immediate violence. It is the knowledge that everything you've known is slipping away, that the ground beneath you is giving way, and you are powerless to stop it. You've seen what's happening in Canton. You've heard the whispers of villagers gone mad, some with no place left to go, others taking desperate measures to survive, and the thought hangs over you, is survival worth it? If survival means losing everything you were, what is left of a human being when their world collapses around them, when the very air they breathe is filled with smoke and despair? Is it a curse, or is it a mirror of society itself? But the cruelty was only beginning. Before the war, life was grim, but it was familiar. The seasons marked the passing of time, and you, like the soil beneath your feet, grew with them. The land was harsh, yes, but it was your lifeline. You knew its rhythms as if they were your own heartbeat. The dry winds of spring, the heavy rains of summer, the biting cold of autumn, and the quiet stillness of winter. Each season had its burdens, its demands, but it was a life that made sense, a life that had structure. There was a comfort in knowing what to expect, even if that expectation was struggle. Your hands, calloused and cracked, felt the land every day. The soil, dry and stubborn, yielded only what it could bear. The harvest was never enough to fill your stomach fully, but it was enough to survive. And survival, in those days, was a small victory. You lived not in luxury, but in something far simpler, in a quiet, almost resigned dignity. But even in this unremarkable existence, there were cracks, small at first, barely noticeable. The first whispers of something foul began to seep into the corners of your village, like a creeping shadow that no one was willing to confront. Opium, the drug once confined to the cities, slowly began to trickle into the rural heartlands. At first, it was subtle. The traders came with their silks and strange perfumes, speaking of something that could ease the aches of a hard life, promising an escape. They spoke of a new world, one where you wouldn't feel the constant burden of the earth's demands. You watched as the addiction spread. At first, it was only the poorest, those desperate enough to risk everything for a fleeting moment of pleasure. But soon, it wasn't just the beggars and the laborers. It was your neighbors, your friends, their faces hollowed out, their movements slow, their eyes distant. The addiction took hold of them like a vine, wrapping tighter with every passing day. The debt grew, and they became slaves to the trade, trapped by the promises of something they could never truly own. It was then that you felt it, a quiet erosion of everything you had once known. The land, once sacred, now seemed tainted. The rhythm of the seasons was no longer a comfort. It was a countdown to something worse. The poison that had crept into the hearts of the people was now inescapable, and the life you knew, the simple, steady life, was slipping away, piece by piece, and you were left wondering how long before it claimed you too. The day the British arrived, the sky turned darker, as though the heavens themselves were recoiling. Black sails appeared on the horizon, cutting through the waters like a jagged wound. The warships, their massive hulls looming like dark giants, seemed to swallow the light, casting long, menacing shadows over the villages along the southern coast. The sea, once a distant, peaceful force, now roared with the fury of impending destruction. You could feel the tremor in the air, as though the land itself was holding its breath. The first whispers of their arrival spread quickly. The ships, armed with cannons that could shake the earth, had come to claim what they believed was theirs, and in their wake there was no room for mercy, no room for hope. They didn't come to negotiate, didn't come to trade. They came to conquer, and the horror of it was not just in the foreign presence, but in the knowledge that your own government, the Qing dynasty, could do nothing to stop them. Rumors of the emperor's impotence circulated through the villages like wildfire. His power was a hollow shell, his soldiers too few, too unprepared to face the might of the British forces. You had always heard tales of the great strength of the empire, stories of its grandeur, of its power stretching from the mountains to the sea. But now, those stories felt like lies. The dynasty that was supposed to protect you was unraveling before your eyes. Corruption ran deep, like poison in the veins of the nation. The officials who should have defended the people were more interested in their own riches than in the lives of their subjects. Caught between these two forces, the corrupt, crumbling empire and the cold, unyielding power of the British invaders, you felt a deep, hollow despair. Loyalty to the Qing felt like a cruel joke. Your own government had failed you, and the British, with their foreign tongues and cold eyes, were not just invaders. They were harbingers of doom, bringing with them a future of subjugation, of suffering. There was no way forward. There was no way back. You could only wait, helpless, as the darkness grew closer. The first battle was not like anything you had imagined. You had heard stories, yes, rumors of the British forces, of their cannons and their ships, but no one could truly understand what was coming until it was too late. The sky, once a soft canvas of dawn, now bled red with the flames of burning homes. The ground trembled under the thunderous roar of cannon fire, a relentless, crushing sound that felt like the earth itself was being torn apart. The village, once full of life and familiar faces, was quickly swallowed by the chaos of war. You remember the smell first, the acrid stench of burning wood and flesh. You were still asleep when the first explosion rocked the village, its shockwave rattling your bones and stealing the breath from your lungs. Panic spread faster than the flames, and the streets turned into a maze of fleeing bodies, desperate cries, and blood-soaked earth. There was no time to think, no time to mourn. All that mattered was escape. As you ran, you saw the faces of your neighbors, twisted in terror and confusion. The British soldiers had begun their march, cutting down anything that stood in their way. But it wasn't just the foreign invaders that brought destruction. The local warlords, seizing the opportunity in the chaos, attacked with their own brutal violence, looting and killing without mercy. Families were torn apart in an instant. Mothers screamed for their children, but the roar of battle drowned out their cries. You couldn't help but wonder how many of those you once knew, once loved, had been lost in the frenzy. The world you had built, however small and fragile, was crumbling before your eyes. The walls of your home, the very earth beneath your feet, were no longer safe. Everything you had worked for, everything you had known, was being ripped away by forces far beyond your control. In the midst of the destruction, you lost something far more precious than property. You lost the people who once filled your life with meaning, your family, your friends, your sense of belonging. The bonds of love and kinship were shattered, scattered like the ashes of a burnt village. You were no longer whole. You were only a survivor. The pain of loss gnawed at you, sharp and relentless. As you fled into the unknown, you wander through the war-torn countryside, the air thick with the scent of smoke and decay. The land that once held promise, the soil you once trusted, now feels like an alien place, foreign and hostile. The once familiar rhythm of the seasons, the pulse of life you had clung to, is gone. Now, the only constant is the devastation. The crops lie unharvested, the fields overgrown with weeds that choke out any sign of life. And among the ruins of villages, you see them, the remnants of humanity, broken and lost. Opium. It is no longer just a poison imported by foreign traders. It has become the very fabric of existence here, woven into the bones of the land. It spreads like a sickness, infecting everything it touches. You pass through villages that once thrived, now mere husks. The people are not what they once were. Their faces are gaunt, hollowed out not by hunger, but by something far worse. The addicts, you know them by their eyes, glassy and unfocused, as though they are no longer tethered to the world. They walk aimlessly, their movements slow and deliberate, as if every step requires more effort than the last. There was a time when the village was full of life, children running through the streets, women gossiping by the riverside, men laboring in the fields. Now, the laughter has gone silent, replaced by the dull, distant murmur of broken souls. Families that once worked together now crumble apart under the weight of addiction. Husbands forget their wives. Mothers forget their children. The drug steals not just their bodies, but their very souls. The love that once bound them is replaced by an all-consuming emptiness. You see how the opium trade has warped the once strong fabric of your community. The traders, with their finely stitched robes and smug faces, profit from the misery they have sown. Every coin they make is a soul they steal, a family they destroy. The very land, once your lifeline, now feels cursed, poisoned by the addiction that has taken root so deep within it. You've heard whispers from others, how the British traders smile, how they grow rich from this endless cycle of despair, and how your people, the ones who remain, continue to sink deeper into a pit they cannot escape. The drug has become a twisted kind of lifeline. It sustains an economy built on suffering, but you know, it is a false sustenance, a fleeting high that only leaves you colder, emptier, and more desperate. The addicts are slaves to it, and the more they partake, the more the land sinks under the weight of their broken spirits. And as you move through this sea of desolation, you wonder, how much longer can this madness last? How long before the very earth itself is consumed by the rot, when all that remains are bodies, hollow, empty, drifting in a haze of opium? You can't help but feel that you too are slowly slipping away, caught in the undertow of this silent plague. It has already taken so much. How long before it takes you too? You could no longer stand it. The endless cycle of fear and loss, the smoke of burning villages, the hollow eyes of addicts, the broken bodies strewn across the land. Something inside you snapped. There had to be another way, another path to survival that didn't end in despair. When whispers of the Taipan rebels reached your ears, you listened. They spoke of a chance, a revolution, a fight to reclaim what had been stolen from you. For a fleeting moment, hope stirred within you, something long buried beneath the rubble of your life. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a way to escape this hell. You joined them, desperate for meaning, desperate for something to hold on to. The rebels were fierce, their eyes burning with a fire that mirrored your own. You fought alongside them, your heart pounding in your chest, the weight of a sword in your hand making you feel, for the first time in years, as though you had control over your own fate. The fires of rebellion lit the night, and for a brief, shuddering moment, it seemed as though the world might still bend to your will. But it didn't last. Nothing ever does. The Qing forces, your own government, turned on the resistance. A betrayal so cold, so calculated, it burned deeper than any foreign cannon ever could. The moment you believed in something, the moment you thought you had a fighting chance, the empire you had been born to serve, the dynasty that had once promised protection, tore you apart. They came down hard, crushing the rebels, silencing any hope of change. The streets, once filled with the cries of defiance, were now only filled with the sounds of death. The fire you had fought to keep alive was extinguished in an instant, snuffed out by the very forces that should have been protecting you. You were left standing in the wreckage, not just of the rebellion, but of everything you had believed in. Loyalty to the Qing? It had become nothing but a bitter joke. The sting of betrayal burned deep in your chest. Your fight had been for nothing. You were no closer to freedom than you had been before, and the despair settled in like a permanent weight. Hope, fleeting as it was, had been nothing more than a cruel illusion. The air grows thicker with each passing day, heavy with the smell of decay and sorrow, but it is the cries of the women that you cannot escape. The war, a savage beast that devours everything in its path, has twisted them into something unrecognizable, something broken. You see it in their eyes, the terror, the numbness, the way their bodies have been stripped of dignity, of hope. The brutality of the war is not just in the gunfire, not just in the flames that consume villages, but in the women who are caught in its wake, discarded like the remnants of a shattered world. Before the war, women were already marginalized, their lives defined by the roles assigned to them: wives, daughters, mothers. They lived quietly under the watchful eyes of men, expected to labor without complaint, to serve without question. But now, they are not just oppressed by tradition, they are crushed under the weight of violence, manipulated into pawns in a game they never agreed to play. You see them in the streets, their faces haunted, their bodies broken. The invaders have come, and they bring with them horrors beyond comprehension. Forced marriages are not rare. They are an expectation. Soldiers, foreign and local alike, claim them as spoils of war, treating them as objects, their bodies desecrated for the amusement or gain of those who hold power. The women who once cared for homes and families now find themselves abandoned, violated, their once respected roles as mothers and wives erased in the chaos. The sound of screams is too familiar now. You cannot avoid them. They pierce the night, echoing in the streets as invading soldiers drag women from their homes, their faces contorted in fear, in despair. There is no escape, no refuge, no safety. The war has taken their bodies, their minds, their very soul. But it is not just the physical violence that destroys them. It is the collapse of everything they once were. The family structure, once a cornerstone of their existence, has crumbled under the weight of the war. The men are gone, either fighting or dead, and the women are left to fend for themselves in a world that no longer cares for them. The bonds of motherhood, of sisterhood, have been severed. They are left to pick up the pieces of a world that has forgotten them, that has abandoned them to their suffering. You feel the crushing weight of it. These women, once full of life, full of hope, are now shadows of what they could have been. Their bodies are used, their voices silenced. They are the true victims of the war, the forgotten ones whose suffering is lost amid the battle cries and the smoke of burning cities. And you wonder, as you watch them, how long until they too are consumed by the same darkness that has already claimed so much of the land. The war has taken everything from them, their dignity, their hope, their lives. It has left them broken, scattered, and forgotten, but their suffering echoes in your heart, a constant reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink in the name of conquest. The weight of the world grows heavier with each passing day, and you feel it pressing against your chest, suffocating you. The once mighty Qing dynasty, the empire that promised protection, prosperity, and order, is crumbling, and you, a peasant, feel its collapse in every part of your life. The emperor, once a figure of divine authority, now seems like a distant shadow, a powerless ruler who has become little more than a symbol of failure. His court, filled with incompetence and corruption, is no better, a farce of power, unable to provide even the smallest shred of defense against the British forces that have ravaged the coast. You hear the rumors, the whispers in the streets. The emperor hides behind thick walls of luxury, indifferent to the suffering of his people. The officials, fat and content in their positions, squabble over their own gain while the country disintegrates before their eyes. Their greed has led to the decay of the very empire they were supposed to uphold. You had once believed in the strength of the Qing, had once believed that it would protect you, that the empire was a bastion against the chaos of the world. But now, that belief feels like a cruel joke. The emperor's impotence is evident in every failed battle, in every retreat, in every city that burns under the British cannon fire. You begin to question everything. You had placed your faith in this dynasty, in this system, thinking that loyalty to the emperor, loyalty to your country, would somehow shield you from the horrors of the world. But now, those very things feel meaningless, like empty promises whispered in the dark. Your loyalty, once unwavering, begins to fray at the edges. The very foundations of your existence, your home, your family, your community, are being torn apart, and your so-called protectors are nowhere to be found. The peasant class, the very backbone of this empire, has been left to rot in the rubble. You, like so many others, are caught between the failure of the dynasty and the tyranny of the foreign invaders. There is no one left to fight for you, no one to lead you out of the abyss. The collapse of the empire is not just political, it is emotional, spiritual, and personal. You feel your own faith crumbling, and with it, your sense of self. The world you once knew is gone, and in its place is an emptiness that mirrors the collapse of the Qing dynasty itself. You wonder, as you look around at the destruction, at the burning villages, and the broken lives, how much longer you can hold on. The emperor, your ruler, seems more like a ghost than a leader, a figurehead that cannot save you. The empire you once trusted has betrayed you, and you, along with the rest of your people, are left to die in the ruins. It is a bitter realization, but it is the truth. Loyalty, once sacred, has become a burden, and the collapse of the Qing is not just the collapse of an empire. It is the collapse of everything you believed in. The British soldiers are not just invaders. They are thieves, murderers, and torturers. Their uniforms, no shield against the darkness within. As they march through your village, they bring with them an unspeakable kind of violence, a brutality that sinks deeper into the soul than any physical wound could. You had heard the stories, of course, the tales from the refugees, the survivors who had fled from cities already ravaged by the invaders. But nothing could have prepared you for the reality that now unfolds before your eyes. The first wave of soldiers arrived like a storm, their boots pounding against the earth, their eyes hard and cold. They did not come to negotiate, did not come to reason. They came to take, to destroy, to impose their will on the land that had already suffered so much. You watch, helpless, as they tear through your village with a kind of gleeful savagery, looting homes, dragging people into the streets, taking what they please with no fear of retribution. The women are their first targets, dragged from their homes by force, their screams drowned out by the sound of marching boots. You can do nothing but watch as your neighbors are torn apart, as their dignity is stolen, their lives shattered in an instant. The soldiers are not just thieves, they are savages, You see it in the way they treat the bodies of the dead, desecrating them as if their lives meant nothing at all. You hear the crack of bone, the sickening thud of blows as they beat those who dare resist. Their weapons are tools of terror, but their hands are stained with something far darker. They leave nothing behind but ruin, nothing but the stench of blood and smoke. They have no regard for life, no understanding of humanity. The soldiers burn your village, turning it into ash. The flames lick at the sky, swallowing everything in their path. The homes you once lived in, the places you once knew, are now nothing more than smoldering ruins. The land you had tilled with your hands is scorched, and the crops, your only hope, are lost in the fire. As you stand amidst the destruction, a bitter realization takes root in your chest. This is no longer a war for land, for power, for riches. This is a war of annihilation, a war in which your people, your culture, your very existence are seen as nothing more than obstacles to be erased. The British soldiers are not fighting for freedom, for justice. They are fighting for nothing but their own greed, their own need to conquer. You are no longer a human being to them. You are just another thing to be destroyed. The horror of it all weighs on you like a crushing stone, and you cannot escape it. It surrounds you, the screams, the flames, the violence. The soldiers do not care. No one cares. You are trapped in a world where survival means surrender, and trust is a luxury you cannot afford. You no longer know who the enemy is or who can be trusted. The lines between friend and foe blur, and in the end, it's all the same, a world reduced to nothing but ashes and blood. The invasion was never just an external threat. It was a force that tore at the very heart of your existence, leaving you with nothing but the taste of despair in your mouth. The war has ended, but its aftermath is a lingering nightmare that stretches out in front of you, long and dark. The landscape is a wasteland, a silent testament to the brutality that has torn through everything you once knew. The villages, once filled with the sounds of laughter, of labor, of life, are now silent, hollowed-out shells. The earth, scorched by fire, holds nothing but the ghosts of what was. There is no future here, no promise of tomorrow, only the crushing weight of what has been lost. Your land is destroyed. The fields you once tilled with your hands, the soil that nourished you, are now barren, scarred beyond repair. The crops you once depended on to survive have been burned away, leaving nothing behind but ash and the faint smell of smoke that clings to the air. The river that once flowed with life now seems stagnant, poisoned by the violence that has passed through it. It's as though the very land itself has been stripped of its soul, left in ruins like the broken bodies that litter the streets. Your family is gone. The faces you once saw every day, the warm smiles, the loving glances, the quiet moments shared in the evening are now nothing but memories, faded and distant. Some were lost to the invaders, dragged away in the chaos of the war, their fates sealed in blood. Others, perhaps, simply faded away, unable to survive in a world so torn apart. The children who once played by the river are now gone, their laughter replaced by the heavy silence that weighs down on everything. And what are you left with? Nothing but the hollow echo of your former life. The land is barren, your family gone, and all that remains is a broken, empty shell of a world. The war may have ended, but its true devastation lingers on, deep inside you. There is no enemy to fight now. No one to blame. The British are gone, and the Qing are too busy fighting their own battles to care about the likes of you. No, the real enemy now is the quiet, suffocating feeling of survival in a broken world. Every day is a struggle, not for victory, not for honor, but for meaning. You find yourself waking only to realize that the world around you no longer makes sense. You walk through the ruins of your village, the remnants of what was once your life, and wonder how much longer you can keep going. There is no direction, no purpose. The future is a cruel joke, an illusion that slips further and further from your grasp. In the end, it is not the war itself that haunts you the most, but the aftermath, the emptiness left behind, the emotional scars that never heal. You are a survivor, yes, but what is survival in a world where everything you once knew is gone? There is no victory here, only loss, only silence, only a slow, aching journey through a landscape of ruin. Years have passed since the war ended, but the scars remain, not just on the land, but within you. The person you once were is gone, swallowed by the darkness that followed the invasion. You live now as a shadow, moving through life with the same quiet despair that clings to the ruins of your village. There is no future for you, no hope of redemption. You are one of many, a faceless peasant whose existence is a mere whisper in the wind, a fleeting thought in the grand story of this world. You scrape by, day to day, working for meager wages, doing whatever labor is available, never questioning, never looking beyond the small circle of survival that has become your life. You have become like the others, those who have learned to live in the margins, invisible to all but those who need their work. The war has taken everything from you, your family, your home, your dignity. Now, you are left with nothing but the hollow echo of what was once your life. The psychological weight of the war never leaves. It lingers, a constant, gnawing presence that festers in the corners of your mind. At night, when sleep should offer relief, you are haunted by memories, the screams, the fire, the faces of those you lost. They come to you in flashes, uninvited, and they tear at you over and over like an endless loop of torment. You cannot escape them. You cannot forget the trauma, not just of the violence, but of the betrayal. The loss of everything you had ever believed in has become part of you. It has shaped you, reshaped you into something unrecognizable. But it is not just your own pain that lingers. It is the pain of those who came before you and those who will come after. The generational trauma of war runs deep, like a poison that courses through the veins of your people. Your children will know it too, though they may not understand it. The quiet, invisible weight of survival will press down on them, just as it has pressed down on you. The war may be over, but the damage it caused is far from finished. It lives on in the way you carry your grief, in the way you numb yourself to the world, in the way you struggle to make sense of a life that will never be whole again. And you wonder, as you move through this shadowed existence, how long it will take before the world forgets what happened, how long before the pain of the past is buried so deep that even the ghosts of your lost loved ones are no longer remembered. But for now, you remain trapped in a life lived in the shadows. What does it mean to survive after everything, after the war, after the loss, after the unbearable weight of the world that has crushed you into something unrecognizable? You have lived, yes, but have you truly survived? Or have you simply existed, a hollow shell driven forward by the cruel necessity of breathing, of moving, of going through the motions? The question haunts you, gnaws at the edges of your soul, and it is one that has no easy answer. Survival, they tell you, is a gift. But is it really? What is the point of surviving if it means surrendering everything that once made you human? The body lives, but the spirit, what remains of it? You have witnessed the brutality of the world, the violence of the invaders, the collapse of the empire you once believed in. You have seen human beings reduced to animals, driven to the edge of madness and despair. And yet, through all of this, you remain. You keep moving, keep going, keep dragging yourself through the broken world that has become your life. But what are you surviving for? What is left to live for when everything that once gave life meaning has been destroyed? The line between human and beast has blurred. In the wake of such suffering, what is there to distinguish the two? The bodies around you are the same, broken, battered, and lifeless. The mind, once capable of feeling hope, now exists in a fog of numbness, too exhausted to dream, too haunted to find peace. The very act of survival becomes a paradox. You fight to live, but what is living when there is nothing left to live for? Each day you wake, you ask yourself why. Why go on when the future offers nothing but more of the same? The world is a wasteland, the earth poisoned, and yet you continue to push forward. Perhaps it is habit, perhaps it is fear, perhaps it is something deeper, something instinctive, something primal. The need to keep going, to endure, even when the reason for doing so slips further and further out of reach. But then, perhaps that is survival's cruelest trick, that it keeps you alive even when there is nothing left to live for. It forces you to keep breathing, to keep moving, to keep existing in a world that has lost all meaning. And in the end, you are left questioning, is survival an act of strength or simply the only thing left to do in the face of an unforgiving world? You have survived, yes, but what kind of survival is this? What kind of life is this? And as you sit in the quiet of the night, alone with your thoughts, the answer seems as distant as the horizon, unreachable, untouchable. But the question remains, lingering like a shadow. What does it truly mean to survive? The echoes of the Opium War reverberate far beyond the borders of China, spreading like a stain across the pages of history. It was not just a war fought over land, not just a war of weapons and power. It was a war that left scars on the soul of a nation, scars that would bleed through the centuries, long after the smoke of the cannons had cleared and the soldiers had returned home. For you, the pain remains, the brokenness, the devastation, the destruction of everything you once knew. But it was not just China that bore the brunt of this suffering. The effects of the Opium War rippled out into the world, reshaping the very structure of empires and economies. The British, with their insatiable hunger for wealth, had turned the opium trade into a monstrous industry, one that spanned the globe. It was a war built not on honor, not on righteousness, but on the exploitation of the weak, the destruction of lives for the sake of profit. And while the British won the war, what they left behind was not victory. They left a legacy of shame, a legacy of addiction, of suffering that would spread through generations. The trade that began in opium dens now spread its tendrils into the lives of millions, both in China and in the far reaches of the British Empire. The addiction, the dependency, was not just to a drug. It was to power, to control, to an empire that fed off the destruction of others. And as the empire grew, so too did the ruin it left in its wake. For China, the Opium War was not just a singular event. It was the beginning of a long, painful period of humiliation and loss. The Treaty of Nanjing, the concessions, the forced opening of ports, all of it set the stage for a century of instability, of foreign domination, of a nation trying desperately to rebuild its dignity. The shame of being forced to open its doors to the very substance that had torn it apart hung like a cloud over the country for generations. The scars left by the war were not only physical, they were emotional, psychological, woven deep into the fabric of the nation. And yet, the legacy of the Opium War does not end there. The ripples of this conflict, this betrayal, extend far beyond China's borders. The seeds of modern imperialism were sown in the opium trade as European powers saw firsthand how easy it was to impose their will on weaker nations, to manipulate entire populations for their own gain. It set a dangerous precedent, one that would be followed by other empires throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. The world was reshaped by the actions of a few, and the consequences were felt everywhere, in ways both seen and unseen. Now, as you reflect on the past, you realize that the legacy of the Opium War is not just something that happened to your ancestors. It is something that continues to haunt the world today. The pain of that war still lingers in the air, in the inequality, in the addiction to power, in the suffering of those who continue to bear the weight of a history they did not choose. The Opium War was not just a tragedy for China. It was a tragedy for the entire world, a wound that has never fully healed. And you wonder, as the years slip by, if the world will ever truly learn from the horrors of the past, or if the legacy of the Opium War will continue to haunt generations yet to come. As the years have passed, the weight of what you've lived through presses harder than ever. You sit in the silence of your old age, a survivor, but one who feels more like a ghost than a living being. The world around you has moved on, grown, and changed, but you remain anchored to a past so heavy that it threatens to pull you under. In this silence, you realize that you are one of the few left who saw it all, the horrors, the devastation, the suffering that defined your generation. And now, it is you who carries the burden of memory. The others have forgotten, or perhaps they were never meant to remember. They have gone on with their lives, their children born into a world that no longer feels the weight of that history. But you are left with it. Every moment, every image seared into your mind. You wonder, in the stillness, why it is that you were spared when so many others were not. Why were you the one who survived? The one who lived to see the dawning of a new world, a world that seems so far removed from the one you knew. The guilt hangs heavily on you, a constant companion, and it gnaws at you when the nights are long and the memories flood back. How many died? How many were lost? And why were you the one who remained? What did you do to deserve to live when others, those you loved, those who fought beside you, were swallowed by the horrors of war? Survivor's guilt has become a prison. You feel as though you are trapped in time, a witness to everything that has passed, but powerless to change anything. You were there. You saw the destruction, the betrayal, the cruelty, and now you live with the responsibility of remembering, of carrying the stories of the lost, the unnamed, the forgotten. You cannot forget them, even though the world seems intent on moving forward, on leaving the past behind. But it is not just the burden of memory that weighs on you. It is the knowledge that, perhaps, your survival means nothing, that the world will never truly understand what was lost, what was sacrificed, the pain of witnessing it all, of being forced to live while everything around you crumbled, is a burden no one else can bear. And yet, you must carry it, because if you do not, who will? Who will remember the faces of the lost? Who will speak the names of those who died so that you could live? And as you sit in the quiet of your old age, the reality sets in. To survive is not simply to endure. It is to bear witness. And sometimes the weight of that witness feels like the greatest cruelty of all. The journey you've walked, the suffering you've borne, has not been one of choice, but of necessity. You've lived through the collapse of empires, the betrayal of leaders, the cruelty of invaders, and the destruction of everything that once made life meaningful. And now, as you stand on the edge of your own existence, you must ask, what has it all meant? What have you learned from the endless torment, the wars fought in vain, the lives lost without reason? At the core of this suffering, you find no easy answers, no simple resolutions. There is no redemption, no final victory, no moment of clarity that makes sense of the destruction you've witnessed. The land is scarred, the people broken, and yet life continues, not as it once was, but as something stripped of innocence. The lessons you have learned are not those of triumph, of hope, or of human resilience. They are lessons in the depths of despair, in the frailty of life, in the cruelty of power, and the deep, unsettling truth that history is a cycle of violence, not progress. You begin to understand that history is not a tale of heroism, but of survival. Survival at all costs. And in the end, what is survival worth when it costs you everything? Your humanity, your dignity, your connection to others. You've been forced to live through a hell, only to realize that survival itself can be as much a curse as a gift. What is the purpose of surviving if the world around you remains broken, if the wounds of history never truly heal? As you reflect on the past, on the legacy of the Opium War, and all the wars before and after it, you cannot help but question, can humanity ever truly recover from the horrors it inflicts upon itself? Can a people ever rise from the ashes of such destruction? Or are they forever tainted by the bloodshed that defines them? The question lingers, unanswered, like the ghosts of all the lives lost, all the souls broken, all the promises betrayed. Perhaps this is the true lesson of your journey, that the scars of history do not fade. They linger deep in the bones of the world, echoing through every generation, passed down like a curse. And perhaps the most haunting truth of all is that we are all complicit in this cycle. We may survive, we may move on, but we are never truly free. The darkness of the past follows us, shapes us, and defines us in ways we can never fully escape. And so, you sit in the silence, the weight of it all pressing down on you. The world moves on, but you remain forever haunted by the question, can humanity ever truly recover from the horrors it inflicts upon itself?